Views and opinions expressed by the guest on What You Got to Say are not necessarily the views and opinions of the show or host unless otherwise stated.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to What You Got to Say. I'm your host for about the next 30 minutes or so, hopefully, Gerard Neal. Ain't got a lot of time, so let's get to it. I try to keep everything within a 30-minute time frame, but last week got real relaxed in my conversation about the real college life and went a little bit over, but decided I'm going to try to be relaxed this week as well, but not take as long. For about the last 7 days or so, I've been hearing a lot about and a constant murmur about Deion Sanders leaving Jackson State and taking a Power 5 school job, which is considered the Big Ten, the SEC, the Pac-10, the ACC, and the Big 12. And the first thing I thought about was why. And believe me, when I was thinking why, I wasn't thinking about the song made by Cameo. And I was looking on one of my Facebook friends' page, a guy who I knew from high school and know extremely well, Kenny Barlow. And he posted on his Facebook page, and this is his statement of, Coach Prime, for starters, should be the number one candidate for every available Power 5 coaching football job. And just so y'all know, when my lower back hurts and I have to take drugs, I get real irritated and get a little cranky. And some of y'all probably always thinking, he must be taking drugs all the time, but I'm always cranky. Not true. But KB's statement triggered a thought in my mind of, why do we always feel like we have to go there to make it? And why are we so scared to bet on ourselves? What I'm going to talk about today is HBCUs HBCUs versus major universities, the prime effect. And I ain't talking about sports. Now, this conversation may be for some of y'all's a little uncomfortable, and some of y'all may get a little upset, but get over it. Don't look at the messenger, just listen to the message. I'm going to read an article and just excerpts from an article by Jermel Hill, who used to work for ESPN, and it's entitled, It's Time for Black Athletes to Leave White Colleges. As I stated, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read excerpts from it. So just stick with me. Very good article. If you ever get a chance to read it, I advise you to do so. She says the NCAA reported $1.1 billion in revenue for its 2017 fiscal year. Most of that money comes from Division I basketball tournaments. In 2016, the NCAA extended its television agreement with CBS and the Turner Broadcasting Network through 2032 for $8.8 billion. About 30 Division I schools each bring in at least $100 million in athletic revenue every year. Almost all these schools are majority white. In fact, black men make up only 2.4% of the total undergraduate population of the 65 schools in the so-called Power 5 athletic conferences. Yet black men make up 55% of the football teams and 56% of the basketball teams. Black athletes have attracted money and attention to the predominantly white universities that showcase them. Meanwhile, black colleges are struggling. Alabama Athletic Department generated $174 million in 2016-2017 school year. I'd love to know what they did just last year alone. Prairie View A&M brought in less than 18 million. 174 million compared to 18 million. Beyond sports, the average HBCU endowment is only 1/8 of that of an average predominantly white school. Taken together, all of the HBCU endowments combined make up less than a tenth of Harvard's endowment. Why should this matter to anyone beyond the administrators and alumni of the HBCUs themselves? Because black colleges play an important role in the creation of propagation of the black professional class. Despite constituting only 3% of four-year colleges in the percent of the black lawyers, 50% of the black doctors, 40% of the black engineers, 40% of black members of the Congress, and 13% of black CEOs in America today. I'll say that again. Despite constituting only 3% of four-year colleges in the percent of black lawyers, 50% of the black doctors, so on and so forth. Top black athletes used to go to black colleges. In fact, until Brown versus the Board of Education decision in 1954, Jim Crow and segregation made black colleges pretty much the only destination for black athletes. But the reason black athletes today don't choose FAMU over Oregon or Hampton over Duke is obvious. Their chances of making it to the pros as a high draft pick and a winning lucrative endorsement deal are enhanced by going to the predominantly white schools that sit atop the college sports world. Even for the majority of players whose prospects of professional sports career are remote, the lure of playing in championships, in giant stadiums with luxury training facilities, in front of millions of television viewers is strong. Clemson is only 6% black, but it won 2 of the past 3 national football championships and has a $55 million football complex. Remember, this was back 2017. And while the Aggies have won the HBCU national championship in 3 of the past 4 seasons, the program can't offer what Clemson can in terms of resources and exposure. AT&T Tire's endowment is worth barely as much as Clemson's football complex. Presented with a choice between Clemson and North Carolina A&T, most high school athletes would choose Clemson, whose starting lineup, not incidentally, is majority black. LaVelle Moulton, who used to coach North Carolina Central, he said an HBU in his article have a hard time, and he said he doesn't want to say it. He said, but black people, I love us. But everyone else understands that we're the culture, except for us. Audiences and money are going to come whenever the product is. We don't understand that, and we continue to give ourselves away for free. And I'm going to slow down a little bit because I was kind of rushing through that article. But I want to go back to my high school years. See my hoodie, it says Crispus Attucks High School. I went to Manual High School for 2 years, but I graduated from Crispus Attucks High School in 1981. Crispus Attucks High School was built in the early 20s because whites in Indianapolis did not want blacks in their schools. So they built Crispus Attucks High School for all of us to go to. Even going to a predominantly black high school, I don't ever remember my teachers or counselors talking about HBCUs. I had a little understanding of HBCUs because who didn't know about Grambling? Okay. And then I had aunts and uncles and cousins who went to Tuskegee Institute way back in the 50s and 60s. So I knew a little bit about HBCUs, but wasn't a whole lot. But my school didn't talk about it. So when it came time for college choice, I was just like everyone else. I was conditioned to think about going to predominantly white institutions, as they're referred to today, but I just call them major universities. So when that time came, I went down the road to Indiana University, Bloomington. And the reason why I went to IU Bloomington because I thought about everything that I had been taught as far as opportunities, name recognition. If you go to this school, you'll be able to get this connection. If you go to this school, you'll be able to get that connection. And I bought in like everyone else did. Not only me, but I have friends who bought in as well. You know, there was a time that we couldn't even go to these universities. But yet now we flock to them. I know no one forgets George Wallace standing on the steps of Alabama University, or if they call it the University of Alabama. And he said, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. Why is it as black folks we forget these things? They didn't want us, had no need for us, but now that's all we do. And I'm guilty of it as well, because that's what I was programmed to believe. That's where I had to go. You know, but the HBCUs were created for us, so we wouldn't be put in that position. And I read an article, and this is what it says. It said historical black colleges and universities were established in the United States early in the 19th century to provide undergraduates and graduate level education opportunity to people of African descent. Black students were welcome at existing public and private institutions of higher education, even after the passing of specific legislation resulting in a lack of higher education opportunities. Now, I also read, which has come to somewhat of the demise of the HBCUs, that once upon a time, when the HBCUs were built on federal land that was given, and I may be misquoting it just a little bit, there was supposed to be a dollar for dollar match. And somewhere along the line, that dollar for dollar match stopped. So a lot of us believe that the only way that we could make it or have any kind of educational validation, we had to go to the predominantly white institutions. But if you look back in time, and you look back at a lot of the prominent people who may be a little older now, and even some a little younger, you'll see that they went to historical black colleges. You know, I have a family member who went to Hampton, who's the principal at Marion High School. I have another one who went to Tuskegee Institute, who has her own school. Another one who went to Lane College, who's a supervisor now at Chrysler, I do believe. So when people start talking about the difference in the education, I'm one of those who believe that wherever you go, if you don't put the time and effort into getting the best education and applying yourself, it doesn't matter. But here's the situation. Not that I agree with it, but I can kind of understand why a lot of our top athletes and those who are not athletes don't go to the HBCUs. Because if you look at a lot of our HBCUs just don't have the adequate facilities, whether it be through your training facility for sports, whether it be for your equipment you have in your chemistry labs, your housing, etc. I know my daughter wanted to go to Howard University to major in films. And when we took some trips to some of these other universities, Howard's equipment in their film department, unfortunately, and it's no knock to them, but it didn't measure up to where my daughter ended up going. And anybody who goes somewhere, you want to get the best bang for your buck. I'm trying to get my son to go to a particular HBCU, or at least think about it. But for what he wants to do, it's the same situation. The facilities and the equipment needed and housing just doesn't measure up. I think we have been the biggest problem, me included, where our HBCUs are failing. Because when we leave our HBCUs, We don't give back to our HBCUs. When our HBCUs have events, we don't attend our HBCUs. But at the same time, our HBCUs have to be in a position where they can show or put their best foot forward in order for some of us to want to come there or want to come and visit or want to give to the universities to make sure that they're succeeding in any kind of way. What people fail to realize, and especially our athletes, I truly feel the reason why our predominantly white institutions prosper the way that they do is because of football and basketball. Think about this. When you go to a football game, I don't care who it is, Alabama, even my old alma mater, IU, draws about 35, 40,000 students or fans to a game, and they're sorry. Just flat out sorry. But when you look at hotels that people rent, when you look at cars that people rent, the money that's spent at restaurants, the money that's spent at the games, the athletic departments get a big piece of that. But the universities also get a piece of that. And when you have that type of income coming in, now you have better facilities, you have funding for better labs, you have funding to create departments, engineering, accounting departments, business departments, whatever the case may be. Your athletics generate a lot of that income. So I got to thinking about this. I said, you know what? I said, what if our athletes went back to these schools? And especially football. Because I'm going to tell you, there was a time that none of the schools wanted our football players to come there. And I did some research on it, and I got to thinking about it. I said, why all of a sudden did they want our football players, talking about the black football players, to come? And I looked at an article, and it said some people point to September 12, 1977, as the day HBCUs lost their corner of the nation's best black football talent. That's the day an all-white Alabama team got their blank handed to them by the University of Southern California, heralded African-American quarterback Jimmy Jones and running back Sam Bam Cunningham and Clarence Davis. After that, football programs in the Deep South realized that if they were going to stay competitive, they would have to recruit black players. In other areas of the country, colleges had already began to recruit. Talking about Southern California, African-American players. The Michigan State team that fought Notre Dame to a 10-10 draw in the fall of 1966. A contest that many still consider to be the best college football player or game of that time, had about 20 black players. So once the schools in the South, where our predominantly HBCUs are, started realizing that we can't compete without these black athletes, all of a sudden they started opening the doors. Forget about what George Wallace had to say. And how can you compete with going to a school that has top facilities, top dorms, top eating arrangements, although blacks probably still had to eat separately from their football teams? But how can you compete with that? Well, if our athletes wouldn't have felt as though we had to go, we would still be in a position, HBCUs, where maybe our facilities would be a whole lot better. Can you imagine if you had Michael Vick going down to Southern? If you had the kid who plays for the Miami Dolphins right now, Waddle, going down to Alcorn State, and you can just keep calling off all these names, going to these HBCUs, just like the kid who's playing for Dion right now at Jackson State, the Hunter kid. People are going to come out, and when they're coming out, they're spending the money, which is going to enable us to continue to lift up our HBCUs and get an opportunity to get better facilities, equipment for the schools, etc., etc. But our white institutions realized something. They said if you can't beat them, we better join them. And that's exactly what they did. And as I talked about, the athletics do more than just fund the athletic facilities. It funds departments and a whole lot of other things. This is why these schools look like they do. But it's on the back of our athletes. You know, I got to thinking about just Indianapolis alone, where I'm from. And before I even started to think about that, I talked to my cousin Steve Johnson, point guard for Washington State when it was the Pac-10. And he and I were talking about, I said, man, why didn't you go to a HBCU as opposed to going to Washington State, considering his mom and dad both went to Tuskegee Institute? And I was surprised at what he said. He said, I actually had a full ride to Tennessee State University. And I couldn't believe that he actually said that. He said, I really thought about it. But I decided to go ahead and go play for Raveling up at Washington State. And I said to him, can you imagine if you had gone to Tennessee State University? And I'm not lying when I tell you my cousin could flat out ball. I mean, he was on the same team with James Donaldson, who played in the NBA with the Dallas Mavericks, and Don Collins, who played for the Washington Bullets at the time. And I said, can you imagine if you had gone to Tennessee State, where your life would be right now? You probably would average about 25, 30 points a game. Even if you didn't get a chance to play in the NBA, you probably would have definitely had a good chance to play overseas. And he said, yeah. He said, but I had to decide between eating steak or eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I said, wow. And that's the mindset of a lot of our kids today. What I'd like to see, and I challenge all you so-called trainers and high school basketball coaches, start steering your kids back towards HBCUs and let our athletes build up our program so people are coming down to these schools and seeing them perform. Because eventually this is what happens. Thought I was going to make it through a whole program without tipping my nose at you. But eventually this is what's going to happen. When there is no money, and a lot of our HBCUs are in a lot of trouble right now, but when there is no money, doors close. And when doors close, your options are limited. And when our schools close up and our major universities see that, things revert back to where they were once before. Where instead of us having the opportunity to go because they need us, now they can be picky about who they want. They can say, I want that big buck over there, the one with the strong arms, the thick thighs, and the long legs. Now it becomes all over like we're back on the slave auction block, getting poked and prodded and looked at to determine who's who. I look at a friend of mine at the congregation that I attend, doctor, Purdue grad, and he actually writes a check every month, not only to Purdue University, but to HBCUs. Because one of the things that he said to me, he sees the importance of it, and he wants to make sure that it continues. We need to encourage alumni. We need to encourage one another to start giving to our HBCUs and stop feeling as though we have to go to them and make them come to us. Because as the article said earlier, we're the only ones who don't realize how valuable our product is. Since I went 38 minutes last week, I'm cutting it short this week. I appreciate everyone listening to what I have to say. I was encouraged to try to be more natural with what I have to say on these programs, but I like to stick to the time that I've allotted. So therefore, I will be doing what I normally do because that's what I'm comfortable with. I want to send a big shout out to my little cousin Brandy, who had an opportunity to be on the Food Network this past week. Although her and her partner didn't win, she still got a chance to win the special challenge. So I want to congratulate her on that, and then with her new job at Southern Indiana University. And before I sign off, remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And as always, 2 ears, 1 mouth makes you a better person. Until next time, peace.